let's come back, and let's come back to not just the via negativa, the new quantum field theory refers to it as not negative gravity, but repulsive gravity. It's important to know that the symbolic ideation understands it clearly as negative, but the refined scientific designation is repulsive gravity. In the quantum universe, space has gravity and thus mass. In the quantum universe, in repulsive gravitational force field, the cosmological constant is a vacuum, non-zero. They say non-zero, but the high dharma refinement of that science language is that it is a fertile vacuum. It is a perfect vacuum, zero, shunyata, nil, but fertile. Hence the classic term, mystic. It's a mystery. How can that be? It can be that way on an 11th dimension. So that it brings into play, just as in 1992, the title is Quantum Field Theory of Point Particles and Strings. String theory. We're about to refine the distillation of the fermentation of the excellence so that science can join the other phases, the other dimensions of maturity. The new Homo sapiens stellaris is star wisdom man. This was published recently in Cairo, the American School for Studies, In Search of Cosmic Order, selected essays on Egyptian astroarchaeology, and one of the chapters in here, chapter 7, is Unveiling Seshet, New Insights into the Stretching of the Cord Ceremony. And if you go to the web, into Wikipedia, there's Seshet, and previous presentation notes make clear many things about Seshet, including the hieroglyph above her head, that is to say, her nimbus, not a circular halo, but is in fact a seven-pointed star with an architectural dome that has its canopy capped. And this, of course, is the architecture that one sees if one were to go to Florence and see Brunelleschi's Il Duomo. Giotto was such a tremendous architect. He built the bell tower, and he built the base of the cathedral, but no one was technically capable of doming it until Brunelleschi and his good friend Donatello, as young men. Donatello is a sculptor, Brunelleschi is an architect, went to Rome, the Rome of the 1400s and set about doing what Renaissance men were really doing, and that is they were measuring everything. In order to get the data field fertile, they kept infusing it with dialogue, conversations that they were having continuously over the days, weeks, and months that they were there doing this. And Brunelleschi, in the Pantheon, looking up at the immense dome of the Pantheon, realized that the solution was Renaissance, hermetically clear, spontaneous. You don't just have a dome, you have a pair of domes that interrelate and have a spiraling kind of in-between that is structural, so that you have a double dome with a spiral staircase that goes all the way up to the lantern at the center, at the top of the dome, which is very huge, 30-some feet, so that you can walk up in the Brunelleschi's dome and walk up into the great lantern and stand there and survey the entire valley out into the hills where Ficino's yellow villa Careggi was exceptionally outstanding, where the Hermetic School of Platonic Academy was held. It is the feminine wisdom goddess who brings that wisdom through. And in ancient Egypt, even by the first dynasty 5,000 years ago, she was the most important goddess of orientation. The stretching of the cord was the way in which the axis of sacred buildings was determined. If you don't have the right axis, the right orientation of your structure, it's not going to be sacred. No matter how you try to consecrate it, it's not going to be able to receive it. It takes the feminine wisdom, high dharma, to show the architecture of a reception that works. Then you have fertility. Mother Nature is fertile. She is uber receptive genius. But it takes a penetration through to her receptivity for there to be a birthing. Otherwise, no dice. No game. None. Here are the 10 steps that Seshet gives in the wisdom recognition written down for the kings, the pharaohs, to understand, and not just the king, but especially the architect of the king. The architects need to be able to understand and to receive. And of course, the architect in ancient Egypt was Imhotep. He was a black African Egyptian genius. The third king of the old kingdom of that fourth dynasty Zoser, had Imhotep as his doctor and as his architect. And it's Imhotep who developed the pyramid through a couple of steps. The step pyramid, the bent pyramid, and finally the red pyramid, and established the pyramid about 2,200 years before Brunelleschi built his dome. It's not made as a tomb. It's not made as a burial place. Pyramids are to collect the energies in a receptive architectural space so that energy achieves an architectonic forming. And it is that forming that is the womb of the sacred that allows for a new life to emerge spontaneously. When received, the birth happens spontaneously. Here are the steps. The king departs from his palace. You have to leave it behind and get to where you're building. The king arrives at the site of the new temple. The arrival at the site already has been prepared by the architect. You don't just go on a patch of ground, a patch of desert. The architect has already seen the lay of the land, and this is the site. This is the place. In the west country of England, ancient Britain, that colorful mountain sequence, the Cotswolds, with a little river running through it, and north of Bath, about 70 miles or so, was the site that they put one of the most sacred places in ancient Britain. It had an octagonal shape, and it was based upon an architecture that had been utilized some 200 years before in ancient Ephesus, when the burial place of the death of the mother of Jesus happened. When that Mary, the mother, died, she was buried in an octagonal building that was on the sacred way, the Via Sacra of ancient Ephesus, that led to all of the ancient consecrated holy places in Ephesus. And it was that was the template that came to the west country of Britain, because one of the daughters of that mother had a very powerful daughter who was the granddaughter of that mother, and the daughter's name was Susanna, and the granddaughter's name was Anna, and she married the most powerful, colorful king of the west country. He goes by the honorific title of Belle Mar, M-A-W-R, like Bryn Mawr, Belle Mar, great excellence. And King Belle Mar was the king of Cornwall. Not only of Cornwall, but all the Cornish people were related to all the people in France, in Brittany. They spoke the same kind of dialect. They could understand each other. So that ancient Cornwall and ancient Brittany were cognate, so that when Anna had a daughter, she had a very high status, because her two brothers, the two sons of Anna, one of them became the king of England, the other became the king of France. The King of England's name was Lud, out of which we get Luddum, London. And there's still a Ludgate into the ancient center of London, named for the brother. And his other brother was the King of France. The octagonal site was made to consecrate the three mothers, Mother Mary, Mother Susanna, and Mother Anna. 3 generations of women who, in their great acceptance of the sacred energy, made it possible for there to be a living offshoot of that high Dharma still viable there in the West Country, and nestled along the river, where the river was crossed by an ancient Roman, early Roman bridge, and that was the ancient sacred way that went from Exeter in southern coastal England all the way up into the mid-country of Lincolnshire to Lincoln, which made Lincoln the destination of this great spiritual pilgrimage road. And where it crossed this amazing little river was the crossroads of the sacred in ancient England. The architecture of Seshet, going back more than 3,300 years at that time, the king and the goddess Seshet stretch a cord around 2 poles. We still carry the signal image of the goalposts. These are the orienting posts. They do not make a line out of which one can score. They make instead an axis that has resonance, that if the resonance approaching that cord stretched between these 2 poles, that axis is a threshold in which the preparation for the sacred becomes fertile, and what occurs inside is the birthing. Moment you step across that threshold. Quicker than immediately. Immediately has a time signature to it. This has no time. It's an eternal event. The king and Seshet, stretching a cord around 2 poles, defined the temple axis. This operation is called, in ancient Egyptian, Pedji Sheshur, stretching of the cord. So that Seshet is literally she whose wisdom stretches the axis of threshold of the sacred, so that one can build and have an architecture in the universe of what the cosmos has been preparing, and all of this is eternally so. The king digs the foundation trench down to the water table. The temple will be a precinct. That is not only the temple, but all of the structures around it, which there will be others, will then be in a sacred precinct. And this sacred precinct will have its own source of a water. In the case of the octagonal commemorative structure of the 3 mothers, it was the river. In ancient Egypt, it was down to the water table, because it's generally the pyramids are not that far from the Nile. The water table is accessible, actually. The king molds 4 bricks for each of the 4 corners of the temple. 4 fours, 16. Remember the Buddha's refinement of a moment of thought, a citta, a citta, has 16 parts, 8 of which are discursive, the other 8 are not. The other 8, I always use the term occur as a trill, but what they are is that the 8 that are discursive are integral and the other 8 are differential. Or in terms of quantum field theory just now maturing, it's a repulsive gravitation. It's what keeps the balance so that it doesn't just integrate to collapsing like a black hole, but it has its equilibrium, and by adding the slightest, tiniest, most minute that you could possibly imagine, and then smaller than that, and fractioning that, what will occur is a harmonic wave. And that harmonic wave is a high Dharma wave of eternity. Accessible to any and all who have crossed that threshold, no matter where it is, or what star system or galaxy. The king pours sand in the foundation trench, and thus providing a compact surface for the construction. The king places a number of stone or metal plaques at the 4 corners of the temple. The corners are the angles. Not that the temple needs to have angles so much, but those who are coming to it in a sacred way will come to it in that great spiraling, like the staircase that's in between the 2 domes of the Duomo. Like that staircase that Michelangelo sought to out Brunelleschi, so when he built St. Peter's, he built 2 domes with a spiral staircase going up to the top of St. Peter's, because the popes, like Sixtus IV, wanted something bigger and better because we're more powerful. You come to something sacred not straight away, but in a circumambulation. Only an idiot, a fool, or a tyrant would go straight into something sacred. Watch out. Something bigger than bear traps and quicker than time, spontaneously. The king moves into place the first stone blocks. He puts the first 2 stone blocks and seals them together. And alchemically, in the language, it's called annealing. You anneal not only the foundation stone, but the first stone to go with the foundation stone. You begin the building, the spiraling architecture of the building to be an expression of that approach that has come to this site with this preparation, that architecture then can be built to be in resonant harmonic with the waves. In quantum field theory, the boundless in bounds, with quotation marks I put there, the boundless in bounds acts like a harmonic oscillator. Their phrase infinitely diverges. Differential. As Bugs Bunny once said, that's all, folks. That's how it happens, is happening. The king purifies the completed temple. He has a model of the completed temple. And he purifies around the edges of this model of the temple with natron, salt from a special place in the western desert called in Arabic Wadi al-Natron, where anciently there were 4 monasteries, like the 4 corners. Why? Because it isn't just that the sacred precinct has 4 corners, but that those coming to it in the right way will make their circumambulations, and their circumambulations will have angular momentum. You get the rotational power, not just because you go around clockwise, but because you balance going clockwise and then pivoting and going counterclockwise, so you get a double chiral angular momentum, and it gives the verve to hold a structure with an eternal understanding of architecture. 10, the king presents the temple to the god. Once more, the temple is represented as a miniature. Offers it up. It's not mine. It's made for thee. It's important to understand when we come to continuing just for a few minutes what we've been developing in India, that the ancient Vedic Aryan conquest never was a conquest. And they weren't Aryans in the sense of that race. The ancient Avestan language, Arya meant noble. It meant those who had understood the high Dharma. Of the 6 spirit helpers and the 7th and 8th axial spirit helpers, Ahura as a masculine lord, Mazda as a feminine radiance overtone. That axis with the 6, not just 4, but something that's really royal, has that hexagon, has that hexagram. The hexagon, like the bees, honeycomb. The French esoteric royal insignia, the fleur-de-lis, is that bee who collects the pollen, who makes the honey, which is the salve that will heal, as well as convey a sweet taste without the sugar high. From the ancient Mohenjo-Daro Harappan Indus civilization, always the great architects of these really high spiritual qualities were black Indians. Ashoka, who built Sanchi in the center of India, was a mulatto. He had splotchy skin. He had the golden eyes and curly hair. My first roommate at the University of Wisconsin was from Alexandria, Louisiana, raised on Calumet Avenue in South Chicago. Had golden eyes, and heavily freckled skin, and curly hair. We're still friends 55 years later. One of the great leading figures in the world with the TM movement. Runs things all over the world. We come now to the great architect of Nagarjuna Kanda and Amaravati. We talked last week a little and Nagarjuna was a black Indian as well. So when it came time to build Amaravati, this is the map for the precinct in the guidebook to Amaravati, but this is the central stupa at Amaravati reinstated, and it is the Sanchi stupa of Ashoka that is completely made into this gorgeousness of Amaravati, And you see, even at the beginnings here, the first of the four entrance gateways with the triple lintel curved like an energy cycle at the top of it, and one finds this particular cycle. This is the great north gate of Sanchi, and was there in Amaravati, built by Nagarjuna about 225 AD, and this was built by Ashoka about 225 BC. So there's a great symmetry to the high Dharma wisdom of history, which is how you can tell if you're following that, as they used to say in jazz, it jibes. It jives. It don't mean a thing unless you've got that swing. And when you do, that's jazz. This great entrance gateway on one of the lintels has this particular sculpture, a nude female showing not only breast but vulva, and a great spiral circumspection symbol just above, and the elephant of Samanta Bhadra, the great bodhisattva of love here. And this woman is not a dancer. She is the Buddha's mother hanging on to the fruiting tree. She is giving birth to little Siddhartha. The birthing of the Buddha by his mother is the way in which this fertile eternity comes into play, because there's been an acceptance. This is the way then that one has the whole complex, the ancient complex of Sanchi with all of the buildings around it. And like almost everything in India, the only thing left is the great stupa and some of the entrance gateways in partial ruin. In Amaravati, like in Nagarjuna Kanda, everything was destroyed, and the only way to bring it back was through a new past. Through being able, through archaeology and through high Dharma reading and learning, to see this is how it really worked, and to see here, like at Nagarjuna Kanda, the Krishna River. Only here at Amaravati there was no dam put, like Nagarjuna Sagar, flooding the area. And one can go, and the great stupa is here in this circle to the left. Those who get the notes, presentation notes, will have copies of these. That's why they're done, just for those who receive them. If you want to receive them, put your order in. The whole distance between the stupa and later the temple that was built is about a mile, so that you come to, off the Krishna River, to a temple precinct to tune your sacredness, and then you make that mile-long walk to the stupa, so that by that time, that pilgrimage has prepared you to enter that stupa, which is empty except for a single relic that sends out the reverberations in that bell-like dome of the stupa, which you feel not just in your rib cage, but you have it in the feelings of the imageal qualities of your dimensions. And once occurred, that moment becomes a bodhicitta Not the thought of enlightenment, but the moment spontaneously that you have entered the realm of the ineffable. More next week.